Welcome back to the podcast. I am pleased to welcome back Jason Douglas. We are going to talk about Sandman Mystery Theater, which was an ongoing comic book series by Vertigo Comics. It was DC's mature audience imprint throughout the 90s. It ran from 70 issues, one annual, put out between 1993 and 99. So, Jason, you get the show here. Talk to me about Sandman Mystery Theater and why you like it so much.
So this was the book that I collected as a kid, the book that I read as a kid, that anybody else that dug comics in my friend group or whatever had no idea, could not understand why I liked it because it is very much an adult book. And I'm not just talking about the fact that it was a Vertigo thing and it's an adult imprint and there was material that you wouldn't put in front of an elementary school student. I'm talking about thematically.
Yes.
There was nothing about this book that should have appealed to me at, 13. It's a noir film comic, right? Like it takes place like in the 30s and the 40s. It's noir films of the 40s and the 50s. It's mystery. It's not super powered. And yet I loved it so much. It spins. Okay, so Wesley Dodds, who is the protagonist, you've got some likenesses to the Batman ethos because he's like super rich and he goes off and fights crime at night for reasons, right? But he's a golden age, his origin, he's a golden age DC character.
Shadow.
Yeah, which is part of the thing that inspired Batman as well. He's this golden age, silly DC character who falls away and pops up every once in a while, whatever, especially when in the 60s, when you've got Crisis on Two Earths kind of things going on in Justice League, and you see some of those golden age heroes pop back up. But what really brought this and allowed it to run 70 issues was the success of Neil Gaiman's Sandman. So you have that modern age Sandman that is basically playing off in that first arc. There is a reference to Wesley Dodds going off and fighting crime during the time when Morpheus, the modern Sandman, is trapped. And if you know that story, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, it was enough popularity to kick off its own title, dark, noir, crime fighting, mystery kind of series that for whatever reason, even at that age, I just absolutely loved. Had beautiful artwork,
The
especially the
covers
early
were
like,
the covers really stood out. They were a photo realistic
yeah.
cover that really popped. The guy that did the covers, I forget his name, but he did every one of those covers, and they just
The interior art early on was by Guy Davis, who I absolutely love, and people probably will know Guy Davis as basically the architect of BPR Hellboy's organization over at Dark Horse. He drew and designed all those great monsters that Mignola didn't design himself. And I just love the book. I love the book. And the art style is not something that should have appealed to that teenage comic fan either. Okay. It is that there's not a single muscle on display in Sandman Mystery
it,
Theater.
if you want to be honest, Sandman Mystery Theater wouldn't appeal to many adults either because it was such a different take on a comic book.
Absolutely. But the storytelling was spectacular. Matt Wagner writes this out of the park. And I loved it. And it's honestly, I've got 2 pages of original art from issue 4 that a friend of mine found in a thrift shop. And it's some of the only original art I have. And Guy Davis signed them for me. And to this day, I love it to death. And I love the fact that it is a contained story, just like Sandman. Okay. I love my continuing superhero comics as much as the next person. But if you can give me 70 and 70 or 75 issues like Sandman was of a story that wraps up and has a beginning, middle, and end, I'm going to go back and reread it, if not reread it. That's like my favorite thing.
Sandman, its costume, because he had a gas mask and almost like a trench coat and a hat before they changed the costume, his outfit stood out among the other superheroes of the 40s. Do you think the character itself stood out among the other more normal type looking superheroes?
The fact that the mask was even the 1940s version of that Golden Age Sandman has that element that, as silly as a lot of those stories were, it has 1 foot further in reality than a lot of the other superheroes or characters because by very nature of his costume, we are talking about it's a fedora and the cape, and the gun wasn't even a gun. It was like sleeping gas, but like the mask itself was like a World War I gas mask. So it wasn't something from another planet. It wasn't something mystical or magical or hyper beyond reality. It was all stuff that was in his closet.
And he didn't really rely on gimmicky stuff like Batman did. He had his little gun and his mask, and that
Yeah,
was pretty much it.
he had his sleeping gas, and that was about it. There was no Sandman ring or anything like that.
What can you say about the two writers that are involved, Matt Wagner and Stephen T. Seagal, who wrote the series together?
Clearly, so Matt Wagner did a lot of good Batman work too. He knows how to write superheroes. And I think a combination with those two guys clearly had a love of noir film and mystery novels and that kind of 1940s storytelling that it comes across in the book. I truly believe that Ed Brubaker is the best crime writer that has ever lived in comics. And he and Phillips's partnership on Criminal and on all of the books that they've done together, I think stand head and shoulders above crime writing and mystery writing that has ever existed in comics before. This is the proto version of that. This has that kind of feel, and yet you still get a little bit of superhero flavor to it as well. Honestly, for something from that era, I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Did you read the Sandman Golden Age story that came out earlier this year from DC?
So I've ordered the trade because that's coming soon. And because of my very infrequent in and out of comic shops these days, just because I'm busy with life and health stuff and teaching and then making my own comics, I missed it enough where I'm one of those people who there's no way I'm buying like issue 3 and saying, oh, I'll fill in the gaps later. So I'm waiting for the trade on that one. But I heard good things and I was really excited about it. Yeah.
Are there any story arcs in the original Sandman that you would recommend?
When they broke it up, you got like a long running series like that, but knowing it's going to have an arc, I cannot think of, when I'm thinking of those trades and the way they broke up the story arcs, I cannot think of a single one that reads in a way that you couldn't pick it up and it be your first. I love that first story arc. And it's not really lacking in anything. It's not like one of those things where they're just getting their legs under them and figuring it out. And it doesn't really take off until arc 2 or arc 3. It's not a book like that. I feel like it was more or less fully formed from day one. You can pick up any single one of those trades and be completely entertained and not feel like you're missing something, even in some of the serialized storytelling about the relationships in the book. You'd be fine grabbing at any point in the run and taking a look.
So if Matt Wagner and the people involved decided they were going to do a revival today, do you think it would fly as well or better, or would it just go down in flames with today's audience?
Almost 100% I would be there on day one, almost 100% sure that it probably would not fly because I don't know that audience is really there anymore. And the comic industry has changed so much since the early and mid 90s that I don't know where that market is. Would it sustain itself in a more indie environment or a self-funding environment? Probably, especially with those names attached, but it's IP and it's owned by DC, and thus are they taking a risk on it? The answer is they did with this little series from last year, but it's not that original team either. So I'm not quite sure.
So you would recommend for any fan today to go check it out and read it. Bottom.
Absolutely, especially if any of the things that I mentioned, if any of that film noir and crime comic book writing and a very different visual style, if that appeals to you at all,
Popular genre in the industry today, much more so than even in the 90s.
if a weird 12 to 14-year-old can get attached to this book, there's no reason you guys couldn't go check it out today. Go get Sandman Mystery Theater, enjoy a good mystery, enjoy a good crime story with a little bit of superhero flavor baked in. It's good genre storytelling, it's good era storytelling, and it's definitely something that you might enjoy.
Douglas, thank you again. You made once again another fantastic guest.
Thanks for having me.